All right, Mr. Chair, we are on the air whenever you're ready to begin.
Let's get going. Welcome everyone to the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of the 27th of July. We have two items to address this morning, but the first part of the meeting will be our administrative catch-up, and we'll start with the flag salute. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Villalobos, good morning, and it's your turn for the flag salute. To call the roll.
All right.
And make the coverage announcement.
Yes, before I do that, just a reminder, because I see that a couple people are unmuting themselves. So if you can just keep yourself on mute unless it's your turn to talk. And then also when you do unmute, just make sure you don't have the meeting on in the background as well, because it creates an echo sound. All right. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Arca areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Friday after 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to the roll call, Commissioner Bradley.
Here.
Commissioner Park.
Here.
Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
And Chair Cooney.
I'm here. Thank you. Mr. Wilson is with us. Good morning, Mr. Wilson. How are you today?
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm doing fine. Thank you.
We've missed you, but now that you're here, will you give us the agenda status report, and then after that, the projection report?
Yes, sir. In regards to the agenda status report, we have two items on the standard agenda. The first one is the continued item, which is the Buell Flat Rock Company reclamation plan. It was continued to today's hearing. And then we have an appeal of a detached garage for item number 2. And that staff is ready to present on both of those items today. And then I can move to the projection report if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Please. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Wilson, when you're ready.
Our next scheduled hearing is August 3rd. We have one item. That item is Santa Claus Lane bike path. And then we have our next hearing after that is August 10th. We have two items on that date, appeal of the Nahoe Farms and appeal of a cannabis storefront retail, which is in Orchid. Then our next hearing after that is August 31st. And we have an appeal of a telecom project and an appeal of a cannabis cultivation on that date on August 31st. And then moving down September 7th, we have an appeal of a cannabis storefront retail that's on Santa Claus Lane in District 1. And then September 14th, we have a outdoor cannabis cultivation conditional use permit on that date. And then September 21st, a new development plan for a new single family dwelling. Oh, that's the wrong commission. That was Montecito. Got confused. Moving to September 28th, we have an appeal of a Via Real cannabis cultivation in the Carpinteria area. And then we don't have anything right now projected beyond that. There are two projects that will be put on the projection report at some point. There's a development project in Orchid on Key Site 17 that we're looking for later on in October, tentatively maybe October 26th. And then North Fork will be, I don't know, we're looking at dates for that. There's some items that we're reviewing at that point. So we don't have a date for North Fork. It was on the agenda and it was removed for some further analysis that we were doing. So that's what we have as far as a projection report. Just a spoiler alert, and I apologize in advance, Mr. Chair, for my next comments, but in regards to nothing serious. Commissioner Briley was like, on the edge of her seats. In regards to the COVID findings that you made at the last hearing, where it's going to be on the August 3rd agenda to make those findings again for 30 days or not to go back in person. But just as a full disclosure for the commission, on August 3rd, if the decision is to go back in person, the earliest we could go back in person would be the hearing of August 31st. And that is due to, we had to send out notices for the hearing for August 10th already. So we sent out those notices as a remote hearing. So that's, there's a lag between noticing going out and then meeting to have those remote hearings or not. So that's a spoiler alert for August 3rd. So when you have that decision on August 3rd, you know what to plan for. And that concludes the projection report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Briley has one.
Yeah, just the Mr. Wilson, the Santa Claus Lane bike path, is that different than the one we saw the street improvements? This is a different component. Because I thought you had said that the or maybe my impression, maybe I'm getting them too mixed up. I thought that the street improvements with the crossing over UPRR and the parking improvements all along Santa Claus Lane, that was needing a time extension, or is this the same thing?
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, that's a great question. I think they're interconnected. I don't have the specific details at this point, but I know there was a permit that they're processing for that bike path along there. So I can have staff reach out to you on the specifics of that if you'd like.
Okay. You know, I just realized it's a 21 case number, so maybe they are separate, but okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, you have Mr. I think I tried to reach Mr. Schmuckel, but yeah, no big deal. But thank you for putting that on a South County agenda for whatever that matters. Well, frankly, maybe we should talk about that for a minute. I mean, to have a whole hearing, if we're all on Zoom, and I know the idea was to have it with a South County hearing, but we know we won't be in person on August 3rd, correct?
Well, on August 3rd, we will be remote, and we will be having the discussion on whether or not to go back in person later in August. I think we want to keep that on August 3rd because I think there's some funding associated with Public Works in order to keep that project moving forward. So I know that we like to consolidate and move as many items as we can, but I'd recommend that we keep that item on there just so that we can keep that project moving forward.
Okay, I thought it was just because I was being greedy and wanting it in the South County because it's the South County project and we have so few in my little district. So thank you.
Commissioner Park.
Okay, I just got a little bit confused in August. So August, we have an August 3 hearing and an August, did you say 31? And then do we have anything in between?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Park, the hearings are August 3rd and then August 10th and then August 31st.
Thanks.
And August 3rd and 10th are both Zoom at this point. And we'll discuss on August 3rd whether the 31st will be in one of our hearing rooms and open to the public. So I'm looking forward to that potential discussion and hoping we are where we can go forward. Any other questions of Mr. Wilson? Don't see any, so let's go to public comment. This is the point in each and every meeting where we invite the public to comment to the Planning Commission on matters not on today's agenda. And I see most everybody here is for one of the agenda items. But if there is anyone who wants to make general public comment, now's the time to do so. And I'll ask our secretary, Mr. Villalobos, if there are any in his bailiwick.
Mr. Chair, no, we did not have anyone sign up for general public comment on this item. All the public speakers are for items on our standard agenda today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Now, Planning Commissioner informational reports. Does anybody have anything to report? Always look to Mr. Park, Commissioner Park, for in between interesting items. Anything today, Commissioner Park?
Yes, I've been even busier than usual on the Recreation Master Plan, ag tourism things. Had some very interesting input from the Hip Camp people in New York on ag tourism throughout the country and how that might relate to what we're doing. Our planning development department stays very involved in all this, and that illustrates how what we see at these hearings is sort of the tip of the iceberg. We see projects, but we don't see all the things that our planning and development department has its hands in and does so very well. One reason I'm bringing this up is there's been some very interesting recent developments I need to talk to Director Plowman and Secretary Wilson about. So if we can talk by telephone after this meeting, that would be very useful. And I'm saying that now because I'll forget later. Also, Farm Day is scheduled again this year for, I believe, September 17, and maybe it's 2 days. It's been a very successful thing, even though it's been interrupted by the pandemic shutdown. And I urge everybody to put that on their calendar, plan for it ahead of time, and get involved. We kind of give people their 3 minutes of fame on our planning commission hearings. And I think it's very useful for us planning commissioners to know more about the activities we regulate. This is an example to learn a lot in an entertaining time. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. If there are no further planning commissioner comments, we will move to the minutes of July 13. That's our most recent meeting. Any comments on the July 13 meeting minutes? Do we have a motion?
I'll move for approval as submitted.
Commissioner Bridley, thank you. Second? Anybody?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Park. I heard you first. All right. Any further discussion on these minutes?
Mr. Chair, maybe I should not be in the motion because I did have to leave during item 2. So maybe we can have someone else be part of the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Park and Commissioner Bridley. Now we have
to second it.
we have a motion and we need a second.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Martinez, thank you very much. Okay. Any further comments on these minutes? All right. Roll call, please, Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Bridley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. So the exciting part of our meeting, our administrative agenda, is the director's report. And do we have our director, Ms. Plowman, here?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, it won't be as exciting because I will be stepping in for Director Plowman. It's her week to be off, and I don't have any exciting news to report to the commission. I can give you updates on what's on the Board of Supervisors agenda. I'm looking at the Board of Supervisors agenda as items that would be of interest to the commission would be on August 16th. We have scheduled the cannabis land use ordinance amendments to go back to the Board of Supervisors. And then moving down, we have a hostile rezone and tentative track map that is scheduled on August 23rd. The commission heard that about 5 years ago. So it's finally going to the board at this point. And then we have other things of interest. I think that is all at this time. So I don't have anything else to report. The board is dark for a couple weeks.
Right. The next board meeting, when they return from their break, is when? Mr. Wilson, do you have that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that would be August 16th.
Okay. Good to know. Any questions of Mr. Wilson, commissioners? Are we ready to move to the standard agenda, or does anyone want to have a short break? I think we raced through our administrative agenda, so let's go ahead and take up item 1. Mr. Villalobos, if you'll read that into the record to get us started.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Buell Flat Rock Company, operator and applicant, to consider the following: case number 18 RVP 6 and the mitigated negative declaration number 21 NGD 3 for the reclamation project pursuant to the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act and the state CEQA guidelines.
Are there any ex parte disclosures that commissioners want to put in the record?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, I forgot. I did actually have a follow-up conversation with the applicant about a month ago. I forgot what the exact date was, but it had to do with their kind of inability to do a different paving on the driveway. So anyway, that was that.
Okay. Don't see any other hands, so let's move to staff. Ms. Ibarra, are you leading us off today?
I am. Hi, everybody. Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Cooney. So as David mentioned, today we're revisiting the Buell Flat Rock Company's deep mining reclamation plan project, an existing mine outside of Solvang that's requesting to revise their current reclamation plan. So we can go to the second slide of the presentation. So the project was last heard by your commission last month, where concerns were raised on potential truck traffic, noise, and dust from continued mine operations at the site. And at that hearing, the commission requested that the applicant consider a reduced truck trip limitation to add some additional dust control, to add some sort of public contact information, and to consider some landscape buffers around the mine site. The commission also requested that staff add a policy consistency analysis for 2 San Ynez Valley community plan policies related to agricultural screening and compatibility. Next slide, please. So this is a repeat slide from last time, but I just wanted to remind the commission and show the public where the project is. This shows the property looking northeast. So the project is limited to Area A, which is outlined in red, shown on the graphic, and it's the bottom left of the page, which is a previously mined area on the western side of the larger Buell Flat property. Next slide, please. So based on the commission's feedback last month, Buell Flat has voluntarily offered the following as part of their project description. They volunteered to limit truck trips to a maximum of 200 trucks per day. They would add public contact information for any direct questions or complaints. And they would maintain at least an 8-foot tall berm around the mine pit to shield neighboring properties for the life of the mining operation. And I'll go into a little more detail on each of these project descriptions next. Next slide, please. So the main one is the truck trip limitation. They've voluntarily reduced their number of truck trips to 200 per day, which is a reduction from the original proposal of 358 trucks per day. It would also be a decrease compared to their baseline. And realistically, as we heard from the applicant last month, that truck trips would average about 50 trucks a day, and that would be of mostly export material, excuse me. So this would allow the applicant to manage their export and import as they need and as their needs fluctuate, and the reduction of truck trips wouldn't require any additional CEQA analysis since we analyzed that higher truck trip number in the MND. Next slide, please. For nuisance complaints, the project would already require the applicant to provide contact information to P&D and the APCD as part of our normal and standard conditions. However, now Beal Flat would also add public signage to the query office for any direct questions or complaints that the public or neighbors might have. And the signage would be intact and it would be updated through the life of the project. Next slide, please. For the landscape buffer, so the mine pit is already buffered from the adjacent properties in the north and the west by a topographical berm and fencing. And as they would continue mining deeper, the berm would get taller, so it would already provide a visual and auditory screen for those neighbors. And Beal Flat has agreed to maintain this berm to at least 8 feet for the life of the mine operation. And then just to mention, upon reclamation, the berm would be used as backfill and the site would be graded for agricultural use as previously proposed, so it would blend in with the surrounding properties. Next slide, please. So for policy consistency, staff also added an analysis for 2 items in the San Ynez Valley Community Plan relating to compatibility with ag land. And we determined that the project can be found consistent with these policies because Area A, the project area, the mine pit, is zoned for agriculture and mining is an allowed use on the site. The mine pit would be screened from the adjacent properties to the west and the north, and the area would be reclaimed back to ag, which is consistent with the surrounding area. Next slide, please. So for findings and conditions, staff determined that all findings can be made, and those are detailed in attachment A to this hearing staff memo, which you all have. The conditions of approval have also been revised with the updated project description, and a new condition was added detailing the voluntary truck trip limitation and reporting requirements that the applicant would have to provide P&D. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make the following actions. A reminder that this would be conceptual. So conceptually make the required findings for the project outlined in attachment A, conceptually adopt the mitigated neg deck that was previously provided in the last staff report, and the conditions of approval included as attachment B to the current staff memo. 3, conditionally approve the project. And a reminder that your action would be sent to the Department of Mine Reclamation, to the state for concurrence, and then returned to the commission for final action. Next slide. So that concludes my short presentation. We're available for questions, and then the applicant is also available to have any remaining statements and questions for the commission. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Ibarra. Very concise and complete. Questions? Commissioner Park.
Yes, and I agree with Chair Cooney's depiction of your excellent report, and I appreciate that, Ms. Ibarra. I do have some questions, though. The berm that is anticipated to provide the buffering required by policy 3.1 of the San Ynez Community Plan, it's already existing.
Yeah, Commissioner Park, through the chair, that is correct. There's a stockpile berm on the north side of the mine pit that would get higher as mining continues, and they would maintain that to at least 8 feet.
So that would be any new buffering would come from this kind of incremental increase in the height of the berm, and I guess I'm stating the obvious. If the berm is getting higher, the pit's getting lower, so it's the activity is getting lower. But speaking of the activity, my general understanding of how this will work is we won't have bulldozers and whatnot down in the pit moving the soil around. What we'll have is it's essentially almost they're like cranes with dropping drag lines into the pit. Is that right?
Commissioner, through the chair, that's correct. All equipment would be staged above grade. I do believe that they'll have certain tiers, so the equipment could be buffered from the very top layer of the mine pit, but it wouldn't be entering the groundwater.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a very important point, because that's right. That keeps all this equipment from being right in the groundwater. But is there a possibility that the equipment will sometimes be located on top of that berm, and especially on the north side, and so the berm itself wouldn't buffer that equipment?
Commissioner, through the chair, I think the applicant would be best to answer that. I think there might be, but I'm not sure if they're the phases in the mining and how that would look as they're going down deeper.
Yeah, okay, well, then that's something I'll ask the applicant. I meant to get out to the property and I just forgot to, and I'm going from memory, but my recollection is there's sort of a ring road around the excavation area, and that on the north side, where I'm most concerned about buffering, that there's some distance, but it's not very much, 5 to 10 feet between the edge of that road and a fence, which I presume is the property line. And then there's some, maybe it's Italian cypress trees or something that are on the neighboring properties. Do I have that right?
Yeah, Commissioner, through the chair, there is a road that goes around the mine pit, and at the narrowest part from the road to the northern property boundary is maybe 10 feet. But then when you get further west to the mine pit, that buffer is about 70 feet, I believe.
Okay, so if there was a need for landscaping, there's some room for it, right, on this property?
There could be. Now,
you made a very interesting statement in your staff report, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm too lazy to look it up. It says something to the effect that there used to be some vegetation, some screening, kind of along that boundary line, that north boundary line, and it was on the neighboring properties, and they removed it. Do I have that right? That's more or less what you said, right?
Yes, Commissioner, through the chair, that's correct. The applicant stated that there were previous trees lining the northern property boundary, and those were removed by the neighbors. However, I don't know the reason why, but perhaps the applicant could shed more light on that.
Okay, so you don't know when that happened, if that happened at a time when this excavation was active or something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct, I do not.
And your information on this is solely from the applicant. It hasn't been corroborated from those neighbors.
That's correct.
Okay. One last thing. When I brought this up at the last hearing, I kind of expected that some people, including the neighbors, might comment on what kind of buffer they felt was appropriate, because this policy is not written to require screening. It just talks about a buffer, and that buffer can take different characters, and it says it's going to be determined on a parcel by parcel basis. So has anyone contacted you to say, gee, I think that buffer is a good idea, and I'd like to see a line of oak trees or a line of this or that? Or is anybody contacted you about what the character of the buffer should be, other than your discussions with the applicant?
Commissioner, through the chair, no, we have had no public comment concerning the buffer itself.
Okay, one last question. This is just sort of an idea to throw out there now. Others can think about it. If I've toyed with the idea of a condition of approval that would, in a sense, require some plantings in that area in between the fence and the road, but that the requirement to put in those plantings would be delayed until P&D had determined that there was sufficient complaints or requests for people to have that. Because if nobody really wants it, why put the applicant to the burden of planting things, bringing water out there, and maintaining it? And is that something that you'd be able to write up as a condition? You can
Commissioner, through the chair, I would look to Aaron and John for that.
Okay, well, thanks. And I have no further questions this time, Chair Cooney.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. Other questions from commissioners of staff? I have one, Ms. Ibarra. One of the issues that has been raised by public comment that we've received so far and at our first hearing had to do with fugitive dust and the potential for that on the project. I believe I read that that's one of the issues, if not the main issue, that there is an independent monitor assigned to oversee the level of dust. Could you straighten me out on exactly whether that is a condition of the project and if there's anything else a monitor would be concerned with?
Yeah, Chair Cooney, absolutely. So a dust monitor would be required as part of P&D's and APCD's standard dust control emissions. So the applicant would be required to present us contact information for that dust monitor, who would be on site to ensure that the conditions wouldn't exceed their dust and visible emissions limits. And if so, they would have to report on that to P&D and the APCD.
And how would a member of the public who's witnessing concerning dust contact the monitor?
Chair Cooney, both P&D and APCD have online complaint forms that they could submit directly to us, and that would trigger an investigation and likely a site visit. Or with the new site contact information, they could potentially go directly to Beal Flat to ask questions or complain to their team.
And finally, but related, if the monitor believes that there is an excess of dust being created, what is the process for that monitor to report that?
Yeah, Chair Cooney, they would email or call P&D and APCD, and then APCD would go out and conduct a site visit to ensure compliance with the permits.
So it wouldn't be the monitor's duty to go to the applicant and try and get the work stopped until all that can be done?
Chair Cooney, that could be a possibility. They could have internal stop works until a member of the county could get out there and investigate.
Well, I just see the situation where we have a monitor who's alerting everyone to this concern, and I'm comforted by the fact that there is a monitor condition, but I want to be sure it's an easy process for the dust to stop, not just be reported, but actually stop. So if we can build that into the condition that the monitor would report the findings to the applicant as well as to the county and APCD, I think that would be a healthy addition. Unless I'm missing something, the applicant may have an objection.
Yeah, Chair Cooney, to mention, the dust monitor would be part of the applicant's team, so they would know immediately if something was out of place on site.
So the dust monitor would be an employee of the applicant?
Chair, that's correct.
Okay, so there'd be an inherent notice to the applicant of the issue, and then the obligation to contact the overseeing their authorities. Well, that's very helpful to flesh out that particular condition. Thank you.
Welcome.
Do I see any other questions before we turn to the applicant? I don't. So let's turn to the applicant for any additional information on the project following Ms. Ibarra's report. Who is speaking for the applicant today, Mr. Briggs?
Chair Cooney, John Hecht is here on behalf of the applicant.
Good morning, Mr. Heck.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Also on the call, we have Jamie Hancock, who is the manager of Beal-Flat Rock, and Helen Aloyan from the staff of SESB Consulting. Thank you again for taking the time, Chair, Commissioners, members of the public, staff. Appreciate your consideration today. As commented by the Commission, Ms. Ibarra did a great job in summarizing the request. We've had a productive period since the last hearing. We listened to the concerns voiced by the Commission and have modified our project, as Ms. Ibarra said, to limit our truck trips, to make sure we have adequate noticing, and to maintain the berm. And I'll go into some of those in a little detail in answer to the Commissioner's questions. The one item we did not implement, and that was a short discussion I had with Commissioner Bridley. We had talked during the hearing about adding gravel to a road that was part of the project, and that road, once we clarified, is not part of the mining project. It's put in place at the end of the project to access the agriculture. So it's not a road that would be used during the project. All the haul routes were already controlled. So we didn't feel that there would be a benefit from a condition adding gravel to an agricultural road after the mining was done. One other thing just to comment on is that, and we looked at the public comments, is that, some are concerned about the vested rights and had questions about the vested rights. And I just wanted to remind and bring up for the members of the public who are on the call, as well as the Commission, that, the vested right goes with the land, and the vested right to continue these operations, as confirmed by the board, runs with the Peterson family. And Beal-Flat is an operator of the facility and has been operating it for a very long time, with very, to our knowledge, very few complaints or none until the last hearing. After the last hearing, there was a complaint for dust. The APCD came out, inspected the site, found no concerns, and so that issue was put to rest. Regarding Commissioner Park's questions about the berm and the equipment, the equipment, currently the pit is about 30 feet below grade. And so the equipment would be staged at that below grade location. That would not go into the water, as we discussed, but it will start down at that level. So you'll have an excavator with an arm, it would operate at the lower level. If you had a drag line or a crane type of an operation, it would be staged between the lowest level and the surface. So the 8-foot berm, which exists on the north side, and I believe would require some additional berming on the west side, would effectively screen that equipment from the neighboring properties. The trees that you asked about, Commissioner Park, my understanding, and Jamie Hancock can correct me, there was landscaping put in. I believe it was on the applicant's property sometime in the past, and that they had been removed by the neighbor. Jamie can clarify that if he needs to. Your concept of your condition, if planting was requested by the neighbors, while we feel the berm would be adequate, the concept of if somebody requests it, then we do it makes much more sense than requiring us to do it now. Because in the discussions Mr. Hancock has had and the past experience, those type of plantings and tree rows have not been something that the neighbors want. That's why we suggested the berm, to provide both audio and visual buffer from the adjacent properties. And again, the question, Commissioner Cooney, on fugitive dust, the site has not had a violation. The APCD does do their inspections. We have the number that is going to be posted, and Mr. Hancock is a very responsible operator. And if there are east wind or high wind conditions, then they will shut down operations. And so they're familiar with those requirements from the district. That really concludes our comments today. We really appreciate the commission's consideration. We're available to answer any questions that you may have, and hope that you see fit to conditionally approve our project and help us go down the road. We've been working on this with the county for a while. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Heck. Let me see if the commissioners have any questions for you or follow-up. Let me ask, just while we're looking, about the monitor. Is Mr. Hancock the designated monitor? Is this something that this position changes from time to time, or how does that work in real life?
I'll let Mr. Hancock respond. Mr. Cooney, my understanding is that yes, he is the monitor, and every time I've been at the site, Mr. Hancock has been there from when they start to when they complete. So Jamie, if you want to comment or add to that, please do.
Mr. Hancock?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I kind of brought my camera, but oh, you hear me. As far as a monitor, yes, I am the general manager at this time. If I happen to retire or leave, they'll have another one, or it just continue on to the manager of the project. And at this time, the only time we seem to have serious problems out here is pretty valley wide, when we have, especially this spring, we've had awful contingencies of higher winds, it seemed like, and some of that airborne dust in particular, some of it's probably come from 10, 15 miles away. But typically on windy days, our operation, we may ship trucks out of here, but as far as running our plant, and that could possibly increase dust, we will actually shut down and wait for the wind to die down, probably the next morning or whatever is pretty much the practice we have right now. The wind seems to be the most problematic issue to dust. I don't think our processing plant is 100% pretty much wet plant, so it's had a hard time for creating any dust. And the mining will be, now a half mile away from most anybody is pretty much at water or below, so there shouldn't be any dust created there either. So it's typically the windy days or something happens, we shut the plant down so we don't contribute to any extra dust.
Mr. Hancock, just to follow up on that, would you encourage a member of the public who witnesses dust, whether it's excessive or not, to contact you at the contact number that you would have on the sign at the entrance?
Absolutely. I mean, it's things we need to know. I mean, this is the first I've heard of any complaints. I've been there 10 years, and this is the first I've heard of this dust complaints or any complaints. And we get inspected by OSHA and MSHA yearly, and they also do dust and noise issues, and we've never had a failure here. And I don't know, before here, I don't know of any failures on dust or noise at this location. But yeah, I welcome anybody complaining. Call me direct anytime. My phone's on 24/7.
Well, if you're the designated monitor, as you've indicated, you're the one to call. If you had somebody else, I just want to have them easily identified. But at this point, we'll assume that you're the general manager and the monitor.
Correct.
Okay, Commissioner Park.
Yes, Mr. Hancock, while you're on the line, let me ask you to give us a little history on the trees or landscaping that were there along the north side. That I think Mr. Heck said they were probably on your side, but then the neighbors took them down. at some point in time. Could you elaborate on that? Tell us what.
I'll tell you what I can. Those trees been there way longer than when I came here. And we had some surveys. They're actually just on our neighbor's property. And we had lost some to high winds and disease, or I mean, some of them were dying. And I know the neighbors didn't want them there anymore. And they had asked us sometime maybe we can help them eliminate them. They want to put a new fence up along there. I said, when the time comes and we can help them, we'd be more than happy to help them remove those trees. One day, I had one of my guys come and said, "Hey, they're pushing all the trees down," which they did. Not all of them for some reason, but most of them. And we just grabbed them and put them in a pile up on our property. I talked to the neighbors and told them, and when the time comes they want, we'll be more than happy to help them clean the rest of that up. They want to put a new fence in. So I don't think those trees were put in on any condition on the north end. There is some bushes on the west end that were put in on the current permit. Yeah, we put a well in to water those and keep them alive during the mining process. But they're 30 plus feet above where we'd be mining now.
So the trees that I see now that are, I think they're Italian cypress or something tall and skinny like that. Is that what the trees were that were removed? I mean, some of them.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they are, John. I don't. The cypress could be, but those are, there was those row of trees all along that first 90% of the north end of the property line, from west end to the east side.
And just with regard to contacting you about complaints, you've been a local resident for several decades, right?
Lompoc, yes. Since 60s, yes.
Yeah, and prior to your long history of Buell Flat, you've been working on this river with granite and long before then, correct?
Correct. I've been in this field 45 plus years. Granite construction, Union Asphalt, Cal Portland, P-Rock Quarry before Granite bought it. So I've been in the area many decades.
And if I wanted to see you, and I know this from my own experience, I can drive up to the office door, walk through a door, and at 3 feet, I'm at the counter and say, "Can I speak to Mr. Hancock, who's about 7 feet away?" That's how easy it is to make a complaint, right?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions of the applicant team? Okay, not seeing any, then we will turn to public comment. Mr. Villalobos has been keeping track of people who may be on the call and wish to comment. So, Mr. Villalobos.
We do have one speaker, Thomas Kiley. Mr. Kiley, if you could unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here. Unfortunately, I don't have a camera. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead whenever you're ready.
I can hear you well.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
You can go ahead, Mr. Kiley. We can hear you fine.
Good. All right. Well, I have lived here about a year, and I have asthma. And I came up from the desert, Coachella Valley, which is pretty allergenic. But I got here, and I started wondering, why am I coughing so much up here? I've talked to a number of people. I live in Rancho Santa Ynez Mobile Estates, and both folks living here with us and the ones in Nyborg Estates have complained rather bitterly about dust. Now, I understand if Mr. Hancock has never received any complaints, that's well and good. We need to correct that, because when I go down, particularly on our lower street, which is probably, oh, it can't be more than 100 yards from the northern boundary there. People say, gee, I wiped my countertops off here, and I've been down there the very same day and run my hand over their countertops, and it comes off with dust. Now, as we all know, dust is an insidious health problem. Anything less than 10 microns can, if you're unlucky, enter your bloodstream through your lungs. People don't wear masks here of any kind of effect, except the little blue masks that we have to wear during the pandemic. So it's been an ongoing problem for years and years and years. I honor Mr. Hancock's statement that he's never received complaints, but I will make sure that that gets corrected. Number two is the noise. That reaches people up in Nyborg Estates, which is on the western boundary, I believe. We're on the southern boundary. When we go out there, we can see how there's, I'm just guessing, maybe 5 acres of a concrete slag that has been dropped just below, just above our riparian rights down to the San Ynez River. And I wondered about that. How did that get there? That certainly couldn't have come from the developer of San Ynez, Rancho San Ynez Mobile Estates. That will be very difficult to replant, to redo, to reestablish any kind of natural appearance there. But the point is that that slag of concrete just reflects that noise off the mining site. I was out the other day trying to water some grass, very little that we have. I got a 7 by 14 plot, okay? And you could hear the grinding of the machinery. It was at a low level. I mean, I'm not sensitive to noise. I don't hear very well myself, but my neighbors say it's terrible. Again, we can work with Mr. Hancock on trying to discover how to better correct that. The idea of maybe something like the Italian cypress trees being planted very closely together would be a big help, because people down on our streets called Rio del Paso can see these huge piles of imported, I call it clinker, aggregate materials, raw materials for them, the folks down there. And this includes Mission Ready Mix and Cal Portland as well. So we're not putting all of this on Buellfat by any means. That whole quarry there indeed was there before we came in here and any of the surrounding residential areas. But I'm reminded of the Burbank problem when LAX was sued by a Burbank association. They said, well, we were here before you were, and so vested rights apply, and you know, go find a different answer.
Mr. Kiley, just to interrupt, I apologize for doing that, but we do have a 3-minute limit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you've got lots of good issues here that you can pursue with the applicant at your convenience. But we appreciate what you've shared with us. If you have anything else to say to the commission, please proceed.
Okay, just one last comment. I'm sorry for running on and on like that. The truck traffic, the original and the one from 2021 proposal was 358 truck trips per day. They now have got it down to, we're going to only do 50 per day, but we would like to have a permission to have as many as 200. How is that going to be, what would be the proper word, adjudicated by the commission? Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kiley, for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll try to answer your questions. Are there any other public speakers, Mr. Villalobos?
None present, Mr. Chair, for this item.
Okay. Then we are ready to go back to the applicant for any additional comments before the commission moves to its deliberations. Mr. Heck.
Chair Cooney and Commission, no real additional comments. We appreciate the comments made by Mr. Kiley. And just as a reminder, you know, the ready mix facilities are the ones that are immediately adjacent to the trailer park, as are some other construction yards. So I think that, you know, when we've looked at that and staff looked at that, Mr. Hancock is doing all he can. And this permit, you know, will apply to his facility. And we've looked at the noise, and we've looked at those operations, and his door is open anytime. So he looks forward to working with Mr. Kiley. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Heck. Commissioner Park?
Yeah, just a couple of follow-up questions with Mr. Hecht and perhaps Mr. Hancock if necessary. When's the last time there was any actual mining or excavation on the property? It's been years, right?
I'll let Mr. Hancock answer that. I don't know how long it's been. Mr. Hancock?
Yes, Mr. Park, I reckon in front of it, it's been at least 2-3 years since we did any actual mining. We've done some slope work and stuff that goes on with our reclamation, but mining's been over for, with COVID, things have gone by like 3 to 5 years since we mined.
And,
Yeah, we applied for the permit, I think 6 years ago. So we were kind of hoping it wouldn't take this long.
and here's a question, I guess, probably for Mr. Hancock. You have a crushing equipment there where you can crush larger rocks into gravel and things. How often does that function?
It varies. It can be 2 days a week to 5 days a week, depends on orders. And it's a pretty small operation. You know, we can operate 1,200 tons a day, 5 days a week, but will we do that? I can't guarantee we won't, but in the past, as I've been here, we probably averaged 2-3 days a week when we were actually running. When I first started, we didn't go 5.
I'm kind of getting at what I'm kind of getting at is what about complaints about dust and whatnot. It's kind of my observation. You haven't really been doing very much in the last year or two in terms of running that equipment. Dust and noise may be very well coming from other properties, not yours. Is that right?
We haven't done much, no. Like I said, we have other construction groups here, and I think Mr. Kiley was talking about concrete slag and stuff. The concrete plant down probably is, they stockpile which would be concrete washout. That is not us. That is all stockpiled, I guess, right? Probably as close as you can get to the mobile home states there. We're another 100 yards away from that, but yeah, but dust I've visually seen here has been from the wind this spring more than anything. Maybe some off-site, you know, dust from some of the fields and stuff from farming, but that's been about it. The wind has created, in my mind, you know, 95% of the dust this year from us anyway. And we're the only ones that I know of in this area that actually water for dust suppression on our hallways, on any of our haul roads. So we actively actually water the road so we don't make any dust.
And I don't mean to sound facetious, but isn't the main complaint you've received in the last couple of years from long-term customers that's saying how gosh darn hard it is to get local gravel anymore?
It's getting more difficult, it seems like.
I mean, you don't really have the inventory, right? And
No, we can't.
yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Mr. Heck or the applicant? Okay, then let's go back to staff for any final comments that Ms. Ibarra or Mr. Briggs might have.
Nothing from me.
Commissioners, no final comments from me.
So that's what you do when you do a really good job up front. Goes pretty fast at the end. So thank you again, Ms. Ibarra, for your presentation. And so we'll go to the commission now. Commissioner Bridley.
I know we're probably in deliberations, but I did have a question for staff. I didn't speak up.
Go ahead, please.
So, and it's very, it may be a no answer, and I'd be happy to deliberate if that's the situation. So we hear from the public and we've received testimony about dust in this area, and clearly there are two other, there are two other sites nearby that can be the creator of that, that factor. And my question is, do you have any sense of how many complaints have been filed for the adjoining operations, that everyone's talking about? And if you don't have that information, that's fine. I just am wondering if there's something that we can understand better about how the other operators are responding to citizen complaints, or if there have any been filed or anything like that.
Yeah, Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, that ready mix plant is on the City of Solvang's property. So County P&D doesn't have any record of those complaints. You could reach out to the City of Solvang, but I don't know personally how many.
Not
but
necessary for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks
But
for
I
that
have
reminder.
heard from the public that they have submitted complaints to the city.
Okay. That helps clarify it 100%. I forgot about that. Thank you.
Commissioner Farini.
Thank you, Chair Cooney. A question for staff. I'm not sure who to direct it to. But through the process, is APCD involved in this at all? Do you communicate with them, Air Pollution Control District?
Yeah, Commissioner Farini, through the chair, they have an existing permit to operate with the APCD. So APCD provides existing oversight, and they would continue to do so. And then if there's any dust complaints, P&D and the APCD work together to resolve, investigate and resolve anything.
Okay, so if that complaint comes through P&D, does P&D more or less then give the major oversight to APCD since they're the air people, or is P&D equipped to deal with air quality issues?
Commissioner, through the chair, yeah, for air quality, we pass on to APCD.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, last chance, commissioners, for staff questions. I don't see any more, so we're ready for deliberations. Commissioner Park, this is a 3rd district item. How would you like to proceed with deliberations?
Yeah, I'd like to go first, and I'd like to kind of address 3 general things. One is just kind of the overall status of the project and a position on its approval or non-approval. And second, to discuss the complaints that have been voiced by Mr. Kiley, some of the other things. And then third, to discuss an idea regarding buffering, just give my thoughts on that and see what other commissioners think. So the first thing is, when this item first came for hearing, which was June something early, I spent hours and hours and hours analyzing the underlying documentation. And that included the determination letter of vested rights. It included an appellate court decision, and it included a lot of other things. Very technical. I think it's something that needed to be done by somebody, and our P&D staff, which is extremely experienced in this regard, had done it. I did it well, and I agreed with him that there is a vested right here, and it predates even my birth. So on the general idea of whether this project should be approved or not and what their rights are, I agree with the staff report. I'm all in favor of approving it because that's what we need to do. That's basically what's required. With regard to Mr. Kiley's complaints, I sympathize with him because I have a problem with cough and so forth for the last year, but it comes from all sorts of things. And it's not necessarily a particular site. Anybody that's lived in the valley for a long time realizes no matter where you live, you get a lot of dust. It comes from a strong prevailing wind from the west that blows across agricultural fields, and they're fine particulates. And some of it probably comes from ready mix and from Portland cement and so forth. I doubt that very much dust at all, frankly, has been coming Mr. Kiley's way or even noise from this particular site because there's been no excavation and because the equipment really is not running on a regular basis. So I appreciate that they would have concerns, but that noise and dust is likely to come from other places. There's also a doctrine that I'm sure Mr. Cooney and Mr. Martinez are familiar with of coming to the nuisance, that when you move into an area where something's been a very long time, you shouldn't be too surprised that there will be some things that may bother you. And that's, of course, what's occurred with everyone at San Ynez Valley Estates, because that project postdates these uses. And it should be noted that this is one of the few industrial zone parcels in the whole county. So that's where things are going to occur. I've had some conversations with staff and others in our third supervisorial district. They are very eager to address ongoing concerns of whether people are operating within the rules here. And so if there is dust and if there is noise and things that you think are going beyond what's allowed, contact the third district supervisorial office and they'll be glad to talk to you about who else to contact and how the system should work. They want the system to work. My last concern is one about the buffering. I brought that policy 3.1 from the San Ynez Valley Community Plan to the staff's attention, the commission's attention at our last hearing. I think they've analyzed it well in Ms. Ibarra's report. That it's not a requirement of screening, it's a requirement of buffering, and screening is a potential form of buffer, but so is distance and so are other things. And when one looks at the policy carefully and thinks about where it came from, it wasn't just intended to protect ag land from other uses. It was actually the reverse in a way. It was to protect ag land from being required to shut down because there were other developments just on the other side of the property line. So if, for example, this applicant was putting in a housing project, we wouldn't want the housing people who came to the area to then complain about odor from the horse manure or drift of irrigation water and things like that. So there's more to this buffering than just protecting the ag land from the other property. It's a lot of vice versa. As a practical matter, I did expect to see some sort of landscaping plan. I'm sort of mixed as to whether it's a good idea or not. It will take bringing some water out there to irrigate it. No one's asked for it. I'm the only one who's even brought it up. Will it make any difference over and above the berm? Maybe, maybe not. Landscaping does a good job of buffering noise and it does a good job of capturing dust. There was landscaping. It's kind of been removed. Do we add it anymore? Frankly, if somebody said, Commissioner Park, what would you plant if you were planting out there? I'd plant coyote brush because it grows so well even without irrigation, and it's all over the place out there. Frankly, probably a lot of the neighbors are knocking down coyote brush as it comes up. And frankly, if you had no plan and you did nothing, you'd get a buffer of coyote brush growing on that berm and on either side of the road. So maybe my concern is overthinking the thing. But I wonder what other commissioners think of a condition of approval that would require landscaping between the road and the fence line at such time as P&D determines that there are sufficient complaints or interest in the neighbors in having that landscaping screening. I'd have to leave it to the experts on how to better draft something like that. And were I to put in that landscaping, I'd have something like coyote brush 10 feet on center, something really very simple. So that's what I have to say. I'm inclined to approve this project because I think that's what we have to do. And I think most of the issues, all of the issues have been very well thought out. I would just like to hear from other commissioners about that idea about landscaping. So thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you. Who else would like to address the project? Commissioner Farini.
Thank you. As far as Commissioner Park bringing up AG's exemption from APCD and dust, we don't have to have a permit from APCD to disc a field and do groundwork. And as Mr. Hancock mentioned, sometimes wind comes up and causes dust to escape the farm, but nobody wants that to happen. APCD still has control and oversight over us when dust does take off. If it is affecting other people, they will come out and work with us on settling the dust, which usually means bringing water trucks out into a field and trying to water down dust. So dust, is at least in my experience with APCD, and they've always been very willing to work with us. So my experience would say that they would be doing the same thing with all of the operations under their jurisdiction in this area. I'm reluctant to support a landscaping plan that hasn't been reviewed. To me, that brings in water use, and as Commissioner Park, you did mention, coyote brush might be a good alternative because it would grow there naturally. Then we get into fire control buffers, rodent habitat that maybe the people next door don't want gophers and squirrels living there and then coming up into their yards. I really don't know. I don't think it's been vetted thoroughly enough by staff to warrant a recommendation from me. It is a long time project. It's a little bit complicated with all of the other operations there, but to me, during the course of our meetings with this applicant, they have stood up and said, "We're here. We're always listening, and we do want to take what action we can." So I would support moving forward with the project as presented by staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Farini. Other commissioners? Commissioner Bridley.
Well, very briefly, I mean, I concur with, I really appreciate what Commissioner Park reminded us about, that he did the deep dive into the background documentation on that, because it's been a longstanding land use there, and it's probably been loved and maybe not loved by everybody in the valley for a long time. So I appreciate Commissioner Park's reminder of that. I lie with the other two commissioners in that this is a long time land use. I think every community has things like this. I can think of the Marburg recycling plant right plunk in the middle of the city of Santa Barbara. That's a loud, industrial, difficult thing, but it's actually very much needed in the South Coast. And so there we are. And this is another thing that's very much needed in the Valley, and everybody can concur with that based on the building trends lately. So I also am very impressed with the fact that the operator has been very consistent and as responsive as he can be. And finally, the agreement to drop the daily traffic down to 200 from the baseline of 338, that's really very, very significant. And I completely support the cohesion of it into just traffic, because you might have trucks, you might have employee vehicles, whatever, but 200 is a whole lot less than the baseline assumption, which was well-founded at 338. So even for people concerned about traffic on 246, this applicant's going the extra mile. Oh, pardon the pun, I didn't even see that coming. To actually reduce it. So I am in complete support of supporting the request. That's my comments. So I'll wait for a motion.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yes, good morning to all. I've heard what the other commissioners have said, and I completely agree with what they've said, and kind of will repeat a little bit. But in the end, for me personally, I really appreciated that the applicant and the efforts to accommodate, at least address, and even attempt to address the concerns of the surrounding community and members of that, and that makes them a member of the community, which hits the heart here. I appreciate also Commissioner Park's comment about additional dust control, I guess I will call it, in regards to putting the natural plants or plantings, whatever. I think to me, I'm actually satisfied by the efforts that were made. I remember there's issues of covering and additional coverings for the dust situation. This is where the I forget what they called it, but non-marketable dirt. I think I remember I asked one of those questions. So all together, and I also was impressed by the fact of the staff and the way they addressed each and every concern there and gave a proficient answer as to each. And looking forward to a motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. My comments are supportive of the project, primarily because the applicant has listened to the commission's comments a month ago or so and has modified the project in some meaningful ways. Our staff has looked very carefully at the project and has incorporated a number of conditions that may not always be necessary, but sometimes are, with the idea of protecting the surrounding public uses. So I really have nothing to add. With regard to buffering, yes, that might work in some cases. Planting a grass for a baseball field would be effective at suppressing dust too, but I just don't feel we have that kind of desire to affect this project. And it is a useful product that's coming out that we have to do our part to take on these industrial uses like any other jurisdiction. So I would support a motion to a conceptual motion as recommended by staff. And I'm going to turn back to Commissioner Park and see if he's prepared to make that motion.
I am prepared to make that motion, Chair Cooney, and I appreciate the feedback from my fellow commissioners on that idea of whether we should add a landscaping requirement that I wasn't really so convinced should happen anyway. And I agree with Commissioner Farini. One thing, when you add more plants and so forth, you've got to look at fire control issues. There's a bit of an irony here. If you did nothing out there, you would see coyote brush erupt everywhere, and it might form a nice natural landscaping barrier. But then we'd all be concerned about whether it's creating too much fuel for fire and want to mow it down. So we might not be helping matters to have any landscaping requirements. So I'm going to dispense with that in my motion. So my motion, I don't know whether it's conceptual or not, but it's to adopt the recommendations in section 5.0 of the most recent staff report. And that is to conceptually make the required revised findings for approval of the project that are included in the attachment to the memo, including the CEQA findings and vested right findings, and to conceptually adopt the mitigated negative declaration that's referred to there, as well as conceptually approve the revised project and direct staff to refer the revised reclamation plan to DMR, the State Department, for review and approval. I guess that's why we call it a conceptual motion, because it's conceptual until it goes to DMR and then comes back to us. So I hope that's an adequate motion, and Mr. Wilson will tell me if it's not, but that's the motion.
Do we have a second? Is Commissioner Farini?
I'll second that motion. Thank you.
Second by Commissioner Farini. Any further comments on the motion from commissioners? Okay, we're ready for the roll call then, Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Very good. Commissioners, let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at 25 minutes to 11. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We're back on the air. Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready to start.
We're ready when you are, Mr. Villalobos.
All right, the following is the hearing on the request of the appellant, Janine Beller, to consider case number 22 APL 9, appeal of the planning director's approval of case number 22 LUP 28.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Travis Seawards. We'll have Tina Mitchell today as the planner, and she will be presenting, and we'll bring the PowerPoint up here in 1 second.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The case before you today is a request by Janine and Kevin Beller to consider an appeal of the Sedaris land use permit, which approved a new 5,000 square foot detached garage. Next slide. The project site is a 0.89 acre parcel located off of Jason Way, just north of Stadium Drive and Santa Ynez High School. Surrounding uses are residential, and this parcel is zoned 1E1, which stands for single family estate residential. Residential accessory structures are permitted in this zone with a land use permit on parcels with an existing main residence. Next slide. Existing permitted structures on the property include a 2,300 square foot single family dwelling and a storage structure, both of which were permitted with land use riders in the early 70s. And there's also a few small sheds on site. The land use permit application for the garage was submitted on January 19th, 2022. Prior to approval of the land use permit, the garage was moved 40 feet closer to the main residence in order to minimize grading. The land use permit for the garage was then approved on March 24th, 2022, and the appeal was filed by the Bellers on April 4th, 2022. The original appeal included signatures from 18 parties, but 12 parties have now removed themselves from the appeal after discussing the project further with the applicant. Next slide, please. The proposed project is a 5,000 square foot detached garage that will provide storage for the property owner's personal vehicles and RVs that are currently parked outdoors in the rear yard area. The garage's roof peak will not exceed 30 feet in height, and grading will include 300 cubic yards of cut, 495 cubic yards of fill, and 245 cubic yards of imported material. No plumbing to the garage is proposed, and the existing storage structures and sheds on site will be removed as a part of the project. Next slide, please. This is the current site plan for the project. As you can see, the garage is sited as close as possible, about 10 feet from the existing 2,300 square foot residence. The driveway access and hammerhead turnaround for the garage will have a permeable Class 2 aggregate base surface material. And the red markings on this site plan are just showing the existing site features that will be removed as part of the project. Next slide, please. This is a photo simulation that the applicant provided to staff, which shows how much of the garage's roof peak will be visible from Jason Way. So the arrow is pointing to the small roof peak that will be visible. And next slide. The appellant cited the following 3 issues as the basis of this appeal. First, the appellant asserts that the project is not in keeping with the purpose of the E1 zone. For reference on the slide, I've included language from the County Land Use and Development Code that describes the purpose of the E1 zone. Second, the appellant asserts that the characteristics of the neighborhood will be adversely affected by the project because the garage's height, floor area, style, and materials are not in line with typical accessory structures found in the neighborhood. And last, the appellant asserts that not all neighbors who will be affected by the project received notice of the proposal, and the director decision was made without enough time for neighbors to review the proposal sufficiently. Next slide. In response to Appeal Issue 1, the project is in compliance with all development standards for the E1 zone. The height limit for this zone is 35 feet, and the garage will not exceed 30 feet in height. The garage is located 10 feet from the nearest property line, and that meets the minimum setback requirements. There are no floor area limitations for garages in the E1 zone, and the new garage will bring total on-site development to approximately 7,200 square feet, which is well below the 20,000 square foot threshold for a development plan. The project will be accessory to the existing residence and will be for private storage of the property owner's cars and RVs, which again are currently being parked outdoors. There are no limitations on the number of personal vehicles that may be stored on a parcel, as long as the vehicles are parked inside a fully enclosed structure. No commercial use of the garage is permitted, and no noise generating equipment is proposed. Therefore, the garage will not impact the residential character of the area or create public health and safety impacts. In response to Appeal Issue 2, as previously mentioned, the project meets all development standards for the E1 zone, and there are no floor area limitations for garages. There are similar permitted accessory structures in the vicinity of the project site, and I'll provide a few examples. There is a 6,000 square foot garage that is 17 feet tall, about half a mile away. There's a 3,600 square foot garage that is 22 feet tall, about a quarter mile away. And there's a 4,000 square foot garage that is 19 feet tall, about 400 feet away. The project is not subject to design review by the Board of Architectural Review. It's not subject to hillside ridgeline guidelines, and is not located within a design control overlay area. The photo simulation that I showed a few slides back shows that only a small portion of the garage's roof peak will be visible from Jason Way. And existing structures and vegetation will screen the garage from public views along Stadium Drive. And lastly, the project will provide necessary screening for the property owner's vehicles that are currently parked outdoors. In response to Appeal Issue 3, the project was properly noticed in compliance with all noticing requirements contained in the County Land Use and Development Code. Mailed noticing was sent to all property owners within a 300-foot radius of the project site on February 3rd, 2022, and a noticing placard was posted beginning on that same date. Next slide, please. This project can be found exempt from CEQA because CEQA guidelines sections 15303 and 15304 apply. These sections apply to the construction of accessory structures, including garages and private alterations to the condition of land. And next slide. In conclusion, this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the Santa Ynez Valley Community Plan, and the Land Use and Development Code. Therefore, staff recommends that the commission deny the appeal, case number 22 APL-9, make the required findings for approval for case number 22 LUP-28, determine that the project is exempt from CEQA, and grant de novo approval of the project, subject to the conditions set forth in attachment B of the staff report. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for your presentation, and in particular the specificity with which you address the appeal. Any questions, Commissioner Park?
Yes. You have to forgive me. I can't remember, did we make ex parte disclosures or not? If we didn't, I'm going to make some right now. Please do. I'm sorry I didn't get that right at the beginning. Okay, so it's not just my memory. Thank you. That's important to me. I was not approached by either side for a site visit. So I drove over there this morning before the hearing. That's why I was a little late, just along Jason Way and also along Stadium Way and also along Stadium Place. And so some of my questions relate to what I saw today and some relate to the approved plans. And Ms. Mitchell, let me direct you to attachment E, the approved plans dated March 16, 2022, this attachment E to your staff report. And I believe the staff report refers to a peak height of 30 feet. But when I look at the elevations, I see a peak height of 26.5 feet. What is the peak height for this building?
Commissioner Park, through the chair. Yes, I can clarify on that. I think in my project description, I was just being conservative and stated 30 feet. The peak height is 26 feet and 3 inches, but we do measure height from existing grade. And the grading plan cross section shows an approximately 2-foot fill over existing grade. So technically the height from existing grade will be about 28 feet, 4 inches. So that's the height you're looking at. And then 30, yeah.
That goes right to my next question, which was going to be the grade level for this. Because I tried to imagine how tall it would be in relation to the Sedaris's house. And so is the grade level of the structure actually elevated from the grade structure of where the house is?
I would have to probably defer to the applicant contractor on this, since he knows the plans best. Yeah, I think I would like to defer to him on that one.
And one reason I asked that is, generally speaking, I think that Sedaris lot slopes downward in the back and then gets pretty steeply downward. And I kind of couldn't tell where the building started, if maybe it started below the grade of the house. And so that is a pretty important piece. I would point out that I think it's pretty significant that it was moved 40 feet towards the house. That reduces the impact of it, I think, quite a bit. If you go to your vicinity map, on the south of the property, there's some buildings that are right at the property line, and they appear to be relatively tall, and they're on the neighbor property. Do you know if that's on the appellant's property or somebody else who is an appellant here?
Yes, the appellant is located south of this property. There's like a tile roof that would be their property.
And they've got the tall buildings in the back then?
Yes, Commissioner Park, through the chair, they do have some accessory structures in the rear, and the proposed garage would kind of line up with the west side of the proposed garage.
Do you know how tall those structures are that are on the neighbor property?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, I don't know exactly, but the appellant is here and could probably answer that question for you.
Okay, and then if this was the kind of project that involved a Board of Architectural Review and that kind of thing, you'd say, well, Commissioner Park, just look at the story poles. I'll tell you how tall this is. But we haven't had any story poles erected on this project to tell us, so we could go there and visually see how high it will be. Is that correct?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, there were no official story poles erected for that photo simulation. The applicant did kind of put a pole up to make the measurement of the roof peak height, and then base their photo simulation off of that pole that was put up.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question you would never expect, but I pay so much attention to ADUs and our ADU ordinance, and my understanding is based on the laws that went into effect, state laws in beginning of 2020. One of the more interesting, I call it a loophole, is that with existing accessory structures, you can convert them to an ADU with minimal permitting and with no limitation as to size. And in agricultural areas, that can be very significant because you have some huge barns and equestrian, covered equestrian centers and things that far exceed the size of this thing. But that's only in certain zoning. Is it your understanding that this accessory structure could in fact be ultimately converted to an ADU under this particular provision of our ordinance? Or is it not in the right zone for that?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, based on my knowledge, I would prefer to double check the code, but I believe that it could be converted.
Yeah, I don't think that loophole, as I call it, is limited to agricultural areas. It's just maybe more significant in agricultural areas. Okay, thanks. That's my questions, and I appreciate your help.
Commissioner Park, this is Travis Sewards too. If I could, we'll look into that ADU question. I wanted to show you the cross section on the site plans, and it may answer your question on the grading issue. If we could pull up the plans, that would be great. It does look like, so let me highlight here. Oh, it won't highlight. So I don't know if you can see my cursor. It does look like it will be a few feet above existing. So existing grade is kind of right here, according to this notation. And so it looks like it slopes a little bit. So it looks like they're just they're going to add some fill here to make it level. But we're talking about maybe 2 feet, it looks like, but we can ask if the applicant has their representation to clarify that. But that's what I'm reading on these site plans.
So our height above existing grade of the house is probably about 28.5 feet. Is that what we're thinking?
The existing grade, and let's see.
Commissioner Park, yeah, based on my calculation of the height, it was about 28.5 feet above existing grade.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that for me.
Sure. And then for ADUs, there is a limit. There's a 1,200 square foot for new development. If you're converting an existing structure, I'm being told that there is no limit in size for an ADU.
Right. So if this is built in 5 years down the line or 10 years or whatever, and they say, I don't want a 2,300 square foot house anymore. I want a house that looks like a steel building, but it's 5,000 square feet. There's my ADU. It's specific to this project in that we're talking about this project. It's an issue kind of countywide, and it's something I've actually advised homeowners associations about in my professional practice. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Park, did you have any other disclosures ex parte?
No, I did not. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me ask if other commissioners have any disclosures. Ex parte disclosures?
No.
Don't see any.
Nope.
Okay, great. So I see the applicant has his hand up, but we're not going to call on him at this point. We'll get to his presentation following the appellant's presentation. Who is going to speak for Ms. Beller? Is that Ms. Beller or a representative?
Hi, I'm Janine Beller. Morning, everybody. First off, I want to just say that I have a flu of some sort, and so my voice is only going to last so long. I wrote down my statement, and I'm going to read from it because I think I'll be able to get through it quickly, and hopefully my voice will last. Please excuse my non-techie presentation. I'm not techie at all. It's okay. Unlike Mr. Sedaris, who's very good at it. I want to begin by saying that none of this, from the first email to Tina Mitchell until now, has intended to be adversarial. We've expressed our concerns regarding this building project from the stance that we want to make sure that what Mr. Sedaris builds takes into account the effect it will have not only on our property, but to all properties in the neighborhood and those within the sight line of the ridge line on which our properties sit. Therefore, the size and the style of the building are of concern. We wished for a civil discourse and dissemination of clear information from all parties. That never really happened, at least not to the level that would have made this more reasonable. From my first conversation with Tina Mitchell, it felt like the approval was a foregone conclusion. We had the sense that this was being ramrodded through and our concerns really did not matter much, which brought us to lodging the appeal of the project. It all started out rather questionably with the sounds of chainsaws. Not many weeks before Mr. Sedaris submitted his application, we woke to the sound of chainsaws that went on and on for hours. Finally realizing whatever was happening on a property near us was not a regular sized chainsaw cleanup project, we went outside to figure out where the noise was coming from. Walking out our front door, we were shocked by the empty sky to the northeast of us. We went to our backyard, the north side of our property, which is adjacent and perpendicular to 999 Jason Way's backyard. In Mr. Sedaris's yard were a crew of guys destroying and removing a massive amount of pieces from the felled tree. A specimen-sized cedar, or I believe it was cedar, that was the perch of various raptors for all the years we have lived here was suddenly gone. Here's my non-techie version. This is the tree. I hope you can see that. You can see at the top, the raptor, one of the raptors who used to sit in the tree. The third event consisted of more loud machinery noises. These were from a drilling truck doing something like soil tests or core sampling. It was not long after these 3 jobs were done, we received notification for a proposed 5,000 square foot steel garage to be built about 20 feet from our house. The loss of the raptor tree was startling enough. The idea of a 30-foot tall, 5,000 square foot building blocking all our view was beyond comprehension. For us, the questions were many, but the main 2 initially were, how does someone remove a specimen tree, especially one that has long been established as a perch for raptors? They may have even had nests in it. They were there every day. We believe that a permit was required for this. We expressed this concern to Tina Mitchell, but it was never addressed. Mr. Sedaris checked the box on his application that says no trees will be removed. He had already removed it before submitting his application. 2, how does a 5,000 square foot industrial steel building that is almost the height of a 3-story structure get approved in a residential area? It is being called a garage, and a garage of that size could fit over 24 cars on just one level. The garage is more than double the size of any house in our area. Still, we had to hold on to the idea that if Mr. Sedaris was going to clean up the junkyard that his yard had become with multiple broken down cars, multiple cargo, flatbed, and RV trailers, piles of tires, and an occasional boat, we would be glad for that part. But the project needs to make more sense. We are in an E1 zone, which stipulates that the intent of the E1 zone is to protect the characteristics of an area and to promote a suitable environment for family life. I still do not understand how a 5,000 square foot industrial steel storage guitar with 30-foot height almost from existing grade fits into this. And I still believe that neighbors do not understand just how large this is. To help with this, I suggested to Tina Mitchell that perimeter and elevation markers be set up as is done in commercial building projects so that a real and transparent piece of information could be presented at the actual site that shows the footprint of the building pad and the elevations. I did not receive a response to this suggestion. The project was approved while we were all trying to wrap our heads around everything in the proposal. Too much information seemed to be missing. Sorry. Although the neighbor to Mr. Sedaris's north will really be in the most direct sight line of the structure, my husband and I will also be in direct sight line, as it will be 10 feet from our property line, towering above all surrounding buildings. And by the way, there was a point about our ADU, the existing, it's not an ADU, it's an existing structure. All of these, or most of these houses here have what were deemed as like tack rooms for horses, because you can have a horse on the property. Our tack room, so to speak, has a 14-foot height to it. And so his building will be 10 feet away from that and more than double the height. No, you cannot really see this structure from Jason Way, but you can't possibly miss it from our backyards. We've been told that one of the reasons the neighbor to the north has signed off on the project is that Jordan promised the neighbor the excavation portion of this project, which will be a $3,000 cost, $300,000 cost for the entire project. That's what was being estimated. Another consideration that should have been addressed is that our properties sit atop a ridge line of the valley bowl here. The building is so large that it will definitely be visible across the valley bowl up to the Quail Valley ridge line. We understood just from living in the area that ridgeline properties had to take into account their positioning and sight lines relative to the ridgeline position for building projects. Therefore, it seems that many more notices should have been delivered to property addresses that follow the ridgeline. To address Mr. Sedaris's rebuttal to the email that I sent to neighbors, he stated that I scared them with my description of the project. I have a hard time believing that I scared anyone. I gave examples of things that would help neighbors get an idea of how large the garage will be, since we didn't have the benefit of border markers and height markers. In his rebuttal, Mr. Sedaris used concrete thinking. He stated that 25 cars would not be parked inside, for instance, and that it was not a business. His rebuttals went line item by line item. The point of my description was for conceptualization of the enormity of the building, not to presuppose what he is going to be doing inside it or put inside it. Mr. Sedaris does claim that he has some upgrade to the siding of the garage. He offered to show it to us. I said I would like to see it. He never showed us a sample of it. He also said that he would be putting in garage doors that are not so industrial looking. The problem with these statements is that they are merely verbal promises. None of us have a guarantee that he will actually make the building less industrial storage unit in style. The building that has been approved looks like this. And the east-west, these are the north and south, and this is the east-west elevation, which to me looks just like the storage units in Santa Maria where Kevin and I have all of our stuff stored. Secondly, Mr. Sedaris mentioned in an email to the county that he and his wife had paid to have an appraisal done to appease me. This is perplexing, but could also be due to concrete thinking. I did state that I'm concerned about how this will affect property values for the properties that are within the sight line of the structure. There's no real way to definitively know this now. I will say there's nothing beautiful about a steel industrial building that blocks a view of almost 30 feet into the sky. The appraisal Mr. Sedaris had done after temporarily moving a bunch of vehicles from his property is the only is only for the proposed building site. It is a shame that he thought that spending money on an appraisal would help. And by the way, we only got the full package from David Villalobos a few days ago, so we only got to see the appraisal just a few days ago. Additionally, we're concerned about fire issues. We have not seen any comprehensive plans for an automatic sprinkler system or hose bib placements. Mr. Sedaris also told me when we met that he was paying to have a fire hydrant installed in front of his house. Where are the plans for that? Please note, this is a massive garage that has a huge capacity for a number of various vehicles. Since it most likely will be a working garage because Mr. Sedaris races cars, and he has told us that he wants to put his container trailers and his racing cars and everything inside. Many gallons of gasoline and other chemicals presumably will be stored there. We would like to know in detail how potential fire risks are being addressed and how the on-site hazardous materials would be monitored. This is the size of a commercial garage. I am sure that there are regulations that commercial garages must follow to stay in compliance with environmental and fire concerns. Currently, there are piles of tires that have been on the property for years. How do we know that any of this will be cleaned up? I can't imagine too many places within Santa Barbara County where a huge industrial style steel storage garage next to a single-story, single-family residence would be deemed a good fit. I hope that a human aspect comes into the decision process. Please ask yourself how you would feel if you were a neighbor to this project. I do wonder if anyone here had such an enormous industrial steel storage garage with no windows, looking nothing like a normal residential garage, going in 10 feet from your property line and within direct sight from your living room windows. Would you really welcome it? In closing, I want to circle back to our intent. This hearing is the only means left to have a chance to discuss concerns that remain, many of which were never really fully addressed. We all felt all along that we were not being listened to. I only wish that the whole process would have been slowed down to allow for a complete review of all aspects of concerns and truly included all who would be affected by the project. Mr. Sedaris's newly apparent wish to clean up his yard after all of these years is a very welcome and appreciated change. We only want to make sure that the project proposed for this cleanup doesn't create a new problem that will be harder to remedy. We remain ready for amicable discussions and hope that we can all make it good, more attractive, and keep it at a place that promotes a suitable environment for family life with attention to health, safety, and welfare for all who live here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Beller. I have allocated 20 minutes for your presentation, and you've gone under that by 3 minutes. And so you have that time for rebuttal should you wish to use it.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, are there other appellants that would be part of the presentation, or are they speaking just as members of the public? Ms. Beller?
My husband has his hand up and he would like to make a statement.
Okay, so the question I'm asking is whether he's part of the public speaking opportunity, which is for anybody, not necessarily one of the appellants, or if he's part of your presentation.
I didn't know there was a stipulation. I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Beller. Mr. Beller, are you speaking as a member of the public? Or are you speaking as an appellant at this point?
I have to say, I'm not sure of the distinction between the two, but I would probably choose to be speaking as an appellate.
Okay, so I'm talking about timing, and so you're going to have the rest of the time that was allocated to the appellant. So you have a little more than the 3 minutes allowed to public speakers. That's the reason.
I
So go
think
ahead.
it would have been 3 minutes either way from the sound of it, but thank you. So I think my wife pretty well covered most of our concerns. I would just add a couple of things that that we moved to the Santa Ynez area in 2007 after living in Santa Barbara, town of Santa Barbara for 32 years. And we came up here to get away from the hustle and bustle and the crowded conditions that had developed in Santa Barbara. We liked the rural character of Santa Ynez, and we felt like it was a friendlier place to live. So that's what attracted us to the area. And we selected the location that we live in. Again, it was very rural feeling. We were directly across from the 4-H project at the high school, and the area has a very nice feel, and it's very rural. That was our criteria. So one of the things that was brought up in the last presentation by Ms. Ibarra was that the concern over the Buell Flat project blending in with the surrounding properties. I think in the case of the Sedaris garage that's being proposed at the 28-foot height, it really is going to be the tallest structure within sight. We live on the top of a canyon, and it's like a giant bowl that leads down into the Quail Valley area. You can see structures around the rim of the bowl. All of the structures, they all blend in. They're all single story. They're made from conventional building materials. They are, I think they're consistent with the look of the area. They maintain the rural character. When you put a 28-foot tall steel building in the middle of this, it will stick out like a sore thumb, and it's going to be visible all around this entire bowl. And I would estimate the diameter of the bowl to be about 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile. You've got a great view line from where we sit, and all the houses on the top of that bowl around the rim are going to have the same view of the structure. So I feel like that should be considered, and I'm sure most of those people are unaware that this project has been approved. There were several promises that Mr. Sedaris made to the neighbors in convincing them to sign off. They included upgrading the siding. That's not reflected in the plan that we've seen. They included cleaning up all the junk that's in his backyard. My wife has already talked in detail about that. There's no guarantee that any of that is going to happen. I'd like to have more assurance that I'm not going to have to continue to have the eyesore of a vehicle junkyard just past my backyard. He also promised to do landscaping. That seemed to be an important factor that was brought up in the Buell Flat discussion, that there was some form of landscaping done. And I think if these promises are being made to people, there should be some reassurance that they're actually going to occur. The other concern, the biggest concern really, is the height of the building. And I appreciate that Mr. Sedaris needs room to store his vehicles. I'm happy to see him gone from from visible sight. But in looking at the plans, the garage doors are 14 feet tall. That's enough to accommodate the height of the vehicles that he wants to place in there. But the eaves are 20 feet tall. Why is there such a large distance between the top of the garage door and the bottom of the eaves? In a normal residential building, that would be about a foot. So that implies to me that there are plans to possibly build a mezzanine on the inside, a loft or something, and that leads right into that ADU discussion that was brought up by Commissioner Parks. So I don't see any of these things reflected in the plans. It is definitely a concern that I think is worth considering. final point, and hopefully I'm still under my 3 minutes, is the amount of excavation, cut and fill that's going to be done. If you look at the cross-sectional views of the excavation plan, the cut can go as deep as 7 feet in some places. That's stepped up to about a 4-foot depth as it approaches my property line, and it comes within 1 foot of my property line. I have a fence there and I have a boxwood hedge that will be affected by that. Hopefully, I'm hoping that there's not going to be any damage to either one of those, but the proximity of the cut is of concern to me. So I think that about concludes what I have to say on the topic.
Thank you, Mr. Beller. Are there any other appellants that would like to speak at this time? Mr. Villalobos, do you have
And
a list of appellants? Excuse me just a minute, Ms. Beller. Mr. Villalobos, what is your understanding of the remainder of the appellants?
I don't have an understanding of that at all.
Okay, great. We'll start here. So there is a list of appellants. It's part of the staff presentation. And if any of those individuals who have listed themselves as appellants on this matter would like to speak at this time, you'd be invited to do so. And we simply need to get your name and address for the record.
Chair
You need to indicate by raising your hand if you wish to speak now.
And Chair Cooney, just so you know, staff was not told by any other appellant that they were presenting today. So I think we could assume that anybody else is speaking for public comment.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but Ann Shipley Carlstadt, she is part of this and she has her hand raised. I don't know if she's not being seen for some reason.
I see it now. Thank you.
Part of this, part of the appellant.
Okay. Ms. Shipley Carlstead?
Yes,
All right. This is your moment.
thank you so much. My name is Ann Shipley Carlstad, and I am Vice President of the San Ynez Valley View HOA Homeowners Association, which is contiguous to Jordan Sedaris's property. I did write a note to the committee to notify them of the intimidating and threatening behavior of Mr. Sedaris's course of interaction with at least 2 members of our association. When he and a lady friend, no one was able to get her name, came into the neighborhood and knocked on doors. At one resident, he intimidated the occupant she did actually, the occupant by telling her she was committing perjury if she would not sign off on the appeals application.
Ms. Shipley, may I call you Shipley or Shipley Carlstead? Would you prefer?
Yes, Shipley.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt your testimony just because what we're interested in as a planning commission here is the project itself and interactions between the parties is not in our jurisdiction. So you don't need to go through that. If you want to use your time in that way, at least we would expect it to be within bounds. But we're more concerned about the project and information you have that would help us decide whether this is appropriate.
Well, part of what Tina Mitchell mentioned was that 9 of our 12 occupants were against this. And now they're saying that they aren't. And I'm just giving the reason why they aren't. And so if you consider that everybody, and not everybody did because I didn't sign off on it, I feel that a 5,000 square foot metal building is too large and not compatible with a residential neighborhood, and had signed the appeals application along with my husband. So I was just talking to Tina Mitchell's report on how these people signed off on it. And so if you take into the case that these people signed off, you're going to think, oh, we don't care, but we do. And there were reasons behind these people signing off.
Okay, that's great. We have that point.
Okay.
And do you have any other comments that haven't been mentioned by other parties regarding the structure?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your participation.
Thank you for letting me.
No problem. Okay, is there anybody else listening that would like to speak as an appellant? Our staff has indicated that there has been no advance notice that would be the case, but I don't want to cut anybody else out if they have a comment. All right, well, let's move to the applicant for a presentation, and then there will be an opportunity for closing remarks by the appellants. Mr. Sideris.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, just fine.
All right. First, before we start, I'd just like to take a moment to thank Tina Mitchell and her colleagues for their patience in answering all of our questions. This is the first house we've owned and the first time with this permitting process, and she took the time to explain each step, and we're very grateful for that. I do have some slides prepared, but before we get into that, I'd like to work backwards very briefly and address a few of the things brought up by the last two parties. I'll work backwards. I'll start with the threatening nature of my meeting with the other homeowners in the condos. I was actually invited there. The unit closest to my property, her name is Kelly Kay. She was not on the appeal. She is on the HOA there, and she invited me to bring the plans over to the pool one afternoon to share with, I believe, everyone in the building closest to us, as well as some in the middle building. Went over the plans, and that was the time when they agreed to remove their names from the appeal. I'll get into the detail of that during my presentation, but I just wanted to clarify that. Another thing to clarify briefly, I believe it was Commissioner Park that asked about the height and the existing grade. I have Brett Gald, my planner here, who can speak to this more later if necessary, but the building will be on the same grade as the house. It will not be elevated. The 28-foot measurement comes from the north west corner of the building where there's a slight dip that will need to be filled. So I hope that addresses that, and happy to answer any questions around that. Another thing brought up in Ms. Beller's, what she said was that the neighbor to the north was in favor because he is doing excavating or something along those lines. He has nothing to do with the project, so I don't know where that originated. A couple other things mentioned, the residential style siding and paneled garage doors as opposed to roll-up doors. Those are reflected on the plans. I believe that was submitted to Ms. Mitchell in the structural engineering for the building. Just going through a couple notes I took while she was speaking. There's not going to be any fuel or anything stored here. I don't know where that came from. And the tires on the property are large tractor tires that predate me. Frankly, haven't gotten rid of them because don't quite know of a proper method of disposal, but that's on the list to handle as we move forward with this project. I'd like to move into my brief presentation here. If we could show the slides, please? Let me see, I'm unable to see them. There we go. All right, I'll speak to this briefly, but I just wanted to give a little background. I've lived in this house since 2014. I live with my wife, Danielle, and our rescue dog, Charlie. We both work in software, but I've been a car enthusiast for as long as I can remember and collect different vehicles, including some classic cars pictured below. We also have an RV and enjoy traveling. Next slide, please. Also worth mentioning is that we both grew up in the Valley. Our parents and grandparents are also live here. All right, this is the how we got here slide. So I'm going to go through this briefly. But another thing I guess I should mention that I didn't list here because I didn't expect it was the tree mentioned during Ms. Speller's presentation. That tree was actually literally a Christmas tree that a previous owner had planted here quite a while ago. And we had multiple tree companies come out because we had some problems with the roots cracking our patio and interfering with our plumbing. And they indicated that the tree was diseased and months away from falling down on the house. So we had that removed at that time per the recommendation. And also it was nowhere near the original proposed location of the building. We shifted the building 40 feet closer to our current residence to satisfy Ms. Beller's request that it not be within view from her house, as well as to satisfy the county's request to minimize grading. I believe it was below 10%. We can get clarity there from Brett Gold or Ms. Mitchell. So moving through this slide here, it just kind of shows a timeline. So last fall, before we started this project, I made contact with the immediate neighbors on Jason Way to ensure they had no concern, and they did not. And I'll fast forward here to March. We found out from the county that Ms. Beller had concerns with the project, so I reached out directly to her in order to address these concerns. On March 12th, I met with her to share my plans. We came to a verbal agreement that I'd move the detached garage to ensure it did not obstruct her view. I paid to have the plans redrawn to move the building to satisfy her concerns, as well as to keep the grading under 10%, as I mentioned. On March 23rd, after having the plans redrawn, the county indicated that Ms. Beller still had concerns, so I reached out to her directly to address the remaining concerns. She never responded to my attempts to contact her via phone or email. In April, the appellant then used the attached letter with many inaccuracies to go to households in our area and try to convince them to sign on to the appeal. In June, I met with the individual households that had signed the appeal to determine if they wished to remain on the appeal after being presented with the submitted plans. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to take your time going into detail on all of these because the actual letter along with this table was submitted in my packet last week for you to review. But to briefly highlight a couple examples, it was indicated that this is a 3-story building instead of a single-story garage, or that it had a 10,000 square foot footprint instead of 5,000. This highlights some of the exaggerated details that were used to get the 11 other households to sign onto the appeal. Next slide, please. I spent a lot of time over the last 2 months making contact and sharing my plans with households that had signed the appeal to hear their concerns. Every household I shared my plans with removed their name from the appeal. Their concerns were based on the information Ms. Bella presented in her letter rather than the submitted plans. There were 2 households remaining that I could not make contact with, trying via phone and in person. They do not have line of sight to our property. Ms. Shipley Karlstadt was one of those. This slide shows those not opposed to the project in green, along with the appellant in orange at the bottom, and the 2 condo units in the farthest building that I could not make contact with. I have made contact with other households not on the appeal, as well as every home on Jason Way, to ensure that they were in favor and had no concerns. They have signed their name reflecting this and through public comment, which was submitted as part of the packet. Next slide, please. So one of the main concerns on the appeal was that the detached garage would reduce property values around us. So as mentioned earlier, we paid for a third-party appraisal to be done. It shows the detached garage would increase the value for our property by approximately $248,000. The appraiser also found that based on his 37 years of appraisal experience, this project would not have any detrimental effect on property values in the surrounding neighborhood. And final slide. just thank you for your time, and I'm happy to address any questions or concerns anyone may have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sedaris, gonna look and see Commissioner Park has a question.
Yes, Mr. Sedaris, I think the primary issue here is whether your project conforms with the scale and character of the neighborhood. And I appreciate your reference and the prior speakers to who communicated with who and so forth. I hope you all realize that whether anybody favors or disfavors the project, what we have to look at is conformity with our land use development code. And I'd be asking these questions about conformity with the scale and character of the neighborhood, regardless of what you say or the neighbors say. But I certainly appreciate your input. And I hope you don't think I'm picking on you, because I chuckle a little bit when I hear about your interests. And I have a house not too many miles from you that's about 10% bigger, and I've got two big steel buildings that are about 10% bigger in total. They were built before I arrived, and I bought the house because I was in love with the steel buildings. My wife liked the house. I didn't even look at it. So I get it. It's nice to have a building like that if you have certain interests. But I'll tell you that you've got a pretty high peak height there and pretty high eave heights. And I'm wondering, given the size of the roll-up doors that'll allow a motorhome in there, or my property, I had roll-up doors like that, and it was used for a well drilling business. They would bring in tractor trailer rigs with well drilling equipment. And we didn't need a height like you've got. So what is it about your project that merits that kind of a height? Can you tell us why you want it?
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, we have an RV that we use to pull a trailer to go to different car events. And I'd like to be able to get that all inside. The RV is currently sitting in the sun and getting damaged each summer as the years go by. The overall height of the building was actually suggested, I believe, possibly by the planner or the contractor creating the building to match the roof line of other residential structures. The 20-foot walls was kind of come up with as a comfortable height to fit, everything in there without having to leave everything outside. I'd like to have space to store the vehicles and, any parts or anything else inside. The idea of this is to sort of clean up the property, and, beautify it, try to make the neighborhood look better, and just space inside to be able to store everything comfortably.
But your motorhome's going to fit through that 14-foot roll-up door, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and I drove by and I saw your motorhome today, and I think that it makes sense that you're looking for a 50-foot depth, because some of these motorhomes are 40 feet plus these days, and you want room to rock around them. And I've also had a trailer with race cars or hot rods in it in our storage, and I can see why you'd want to have that depth for the trailer. I'm still getting back to the height. It doesn't seem like it's demanded for the function of storing those vehicles, but you're telling us that it was recommended by a planner or somebody is just something that would fit in with the neighborhood. Is that right?
So the wall height of 20 feet was my idea, and the overall roof peak of 26 feet 3 inches was to match the 312 roof pitch of existing structures. But yes, that 20 feet I came up with to have enough room to get the RV in there, to be able to stand on the top, to make any repairs that need to be done on the roof, and just to have space to store, car-related things in the building. I had one other thing I wanted to mention on that, but it's escaped me. So does that answer your question?
I think so, because like I said, I'm very familiar with owning for decades now those steel buildings that are similar and doing all the things you're talking about. And I get what you're saying. I don't necessarily totally agree with that, but that's an issue we'll discuss as this goes on. So thanks.
And the one other thing I wanted to mention, I do remember what I was going to say. There was mention of a mezzanine inside, and I just like to point out that with the doors in the RV, there's no room to do that on top of that space with 20-foot walls.
Okay, thanks.
Any other commissioners with questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Commissioner Bradley.
Yeah. Thank you. It sounds, not getting into all the he said, she said, but Mr. Sidaris, did you ever consider a landscaping component along that property line behind the new garage storage structure that might soften the appearance to the neighbors? You know, like a tree line or something like that, that might.
Absolutely. I discussed that with the neighbor on the corner, planting different trees. We looked at privets and I believe hopseed. I forget the other one we looked at, but we went to the nursery, my wife and I did, and we spoke to the neighbor about it. And he's a fan of planting things of that sort. And so our plan was to put landscaping in around the edges of the property. I plan to do that at the bottom of the property. I guess that would be the west side, as well as the south side, to just help with, privacy, etc.
Okay. Good, because it might be that what we want to do is have that specified in the land use permit so everybody can rely on it. That's fair. And then the second question was, just want to confirm, I looked at the plans in the packet and want to make sure you don't have any proposal for lighting on that rear facade of the building that would be adjoining the Bellers site, right? There's no lighting on that elevation, correct?
The only lighting would be by the door facing my residence, which I believe was mandated by the county to have a dark sky compliant light next to that entryway, but no other lighting other than that is proposed.
So that would be actually on the east elevation, not the north elevation on the opposite side of the building?
Correct. The
Okay.
elevation directly facing my current residence.
Okay. Okay, that was my only question, and thanks.
Anybody else? Not seeing any. Our procedure here is to go back to Ms. Beller for a few minutes of closing comment.
Mr. Chair, if we could open to public comment. Sorry to cut you off.
First, okay, let's do that. In terms of general comment, you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission on this project. Hopefully focusing on the project itself rather than the process. And Mr. Villalobos, do we have public speakers?
Mr. Chair, just going back to your question to me originally about the list of appellants, we do not have any additional public speakers who were not identified as part of the appellant team.
Okay. Are there any other individuals that want to address the commission on behalf of the appellant? I think we have heard from those who do intend to speak, but if anyone has been overlooked, please let us know now. All right, we'll go back to Ms. Beller then, the primary appellant, for her additional remarks and closing.
Thank you very much. First off, I want to start out again by saying we don't want to be adversarial about this. We very much appreciate that Mr. Sidaris and his wife want to clean up their yard. We had no real indication of what might happen as far as his intent for landscaping, which was one of our concerns. And we appreciate Commissioner Bridley's mention of that. And by the way, the tree that was there was massive and was there long before Kevin and I moved here in 2007. And our tree trimmers said that it was fine, but it's irrelevant at this point. The tree's gone. And it was a raptor perch. As far as Mr. Sidaris's comment regarding no fuel will be stored in the garage, it's a 5,000 square foot garage. It's going to hold multiple vehicles. We presume that there's gasoline in the vehicles. And various solvents are used in garages. So, of course, it's a concern. I still refer back to our thoughts about an automatic sprinkling system should be included in the plans for this because of the fire hazards due to that. Mr. Sedaris also refers to his RV that he uses. Currently, there are, I can see it from here, that he's got about 5 RV-sized trailers there right now. There are some in the front that you can see from Jason Way, but the others are down on the west side of the property. So there are multiple RVs or trailers, as I said, cargo-sized container trailers that will be, it will be wonderful if you can get them inside a building, and we appreciate that he wants to do this. The other thing is that he said that he tried to contact me after to go back over what we had discussed in our personal meeting together. We have all kinds of Wi-Fi and internet problems. I'm surprised that we're online right now, but I did not receive everything that he has mentioned. But I appreciate that he tried. And the moving of the building, we were told, was not really in such concern for our view, which we appreciate that maybe there was an element to that, but it really was to mitigate the 10% grading issues that Mr. Sedaris had on the property. We just want assurances that this building isn't going to be so massive and such an eyesore that, you know, it's not in compliance with what we think an E1 zoning stipulates. And I can't imagine a residential style garage would look anything like what we've seen. Now, Mr. Sedaris has said that he submitted something to Tina Mitchell that shows an upgraded garage door style and siding, and we have nothing but what I showed you in my presentation. So it's all we have to go by. It looks exactly like the storage units all over the state of California. I would really appreciate being able to see something that made it look like it fit more in keeping with a residential area. So that's really my main rebuttal for everything that's been stated.
Good job, Ms. Beller. You got a lot in there.
Thank you.
So we've now heard from the appellant and a final opportunity for Mr. Sedaris, the applicant, to make a last comment before we submit this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just like to touch on a couple things Ms. Beller just brought up. The sprinklers will be required. That's reflected in the packet that Ms. Mitchell has. The fire hydrant, I believe we were not sure until we got a fire report. I think that comes after the land use permit, but it's possible that will be required. The trailers she mentioned in the back are where the vehicles are currently stored. The plan is to get those out and inside the building, just keeping the trailer we use to travel, and the rest will move on because they'll no longer be needed to store cars. As far as contact, I reached out to her via phone and email to share the plans after I had them redrawn and did not hear back. I get that there's technical problems, but she was always welcome to contact me as well, and I've heard nothing since that time. And as far as moving the building, if you look at where it is on the plans now, 40 feet closer to our residence, which puts it, I believe, 20 feet away from our back wall, was 100% to appease them as far as the view went, so we would not impede their view. The 10% grading restrictions at the time we were looking at moving the building actually farther away from my residence to get in a flatter area where there would not be that grading required. But after meeting with her, and her view was one of the major concerns she had, we moved it directly up against this current residence to make sure she wasn't, her view wasn't obstructed. our intentions in doing this and why we took the time, a lot of time, many hours spent with neighbors, is to ensure that everyone was on board. So we've done the best of our ability to address that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sedaris. And I'd like to think your efforts in that regard have been helpful in this matter. The compatibility of the buildings is one thing. The compatibility of the neighbors runs deeper, and you certainly made an effort. Okay. We have heard from the appellants, the applicant, and also from an additional member of the applicant group. So I think we're ready to come back and see if there are any additional remarks from our staff. Ms. Mitchell?
Yeah, Chair Cooney, I'd just like to touch on a few points that were brought up regarding the tree that was removed. It's not a protected species, and there's no permit requirements for that. So we were just looking at baseline when this application came in, and that tree wasn't there. Again, Board of Architectural Review was not required for this project. So typically when there's a story pole requirement, that comes from a Board of Architectural Review or for a discretionary project. So I didn't feel that it was necessary for this one, and there's no requirement in our code for story poles for a project like this. And lastly, this project meets all of the development standards in the code, specifically height, and there's no floor area limitations, so it's in compliance with the code in that regard. Mr. Sewards, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Thanks, Ms. Mitchell. I think it's important to clarify too that there are no landscaping requirements in our code for accessory structures as well. Thanks, Tina.
Ms. Mitchell, there was reference a number of times to a packet of materials submitted by the applicant. I think he said last week. I didn't get those. I don't know if you sent them out to the commission or if the timing is different.
Chair Cooney, everything I received is available on our website in the files. So that's what we have. The plans that were approved are what we have. If there was some discussion of a different siting, we didn't receive that. So what the plans are is what we reviewed and approved. Okay.
So that for clarification, then the comment by the appellant that they were shown a different siding or door is not reflected in the plans so far supporting the project.
Chair Cooney, no, what we have is what was approved, and I don't know if there was different promises made. I wasn't part of that conversation.
Okay, I was just concerned that maybe there were some materials the parties were relying on that we hadn't received, because our planning commission report was dated the 19th of July, and you haven't submitted anything else to the commission since then, right?
Chair Cooney, no. What we have is the most updated materials that I've received. There's nothing beyond the staff report from the 19th.
That helps me. Thank you. Mr. Sedaris, I know you probably have something to clarify, but we've moved away from the appellant and the applicant at this point. So I'm going to call on Commissioner Farini next.
Thank you, Chair Cooney. I'm not sure if this is a legal question or if it's for staff, but Commissioner Park brought up the ADU conversion on an existing building. And I would like a little more information on that. Would this be called a pre-existing building, or it was not built before the ordinance went in to discuss pre-existing? Therefore, it would not be able to be changed to an ADU as a grandfathered building. Can anybody help me with that?
Sure.
Mr. Stewart?
Yep, sure. Chair Cooney and Commissioner Freeney. So this is a proposed structure. It would be built as a garage. So people can convert structures to a habitable use, but they would have to come in and get, permits, and building would review it, and they would have to convert it to residential standards. So it is not prohibited for people to convert it.
Okay, but technically then they could go and put in a 5,000 square foot ADU because it's an existing barn.
Yes, that is correct.
Even though it wasn't pre-existing prior to the writing of the ordinance.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Boy, we always find the loopholes, huh? Okay, and then the next question would be as to the height. Do we have any ability to change the height of this building? Is that within our purview?
I think I would say that this is an LUP, and so there is limited discretion. The findings say that that it needs to be consistent with the community plan and the zoning requirements, and staff's review is it does comply and is consistent with all of the requirements, and so changing the height, I think, would have to be tied to a specific issue that is identified that the commission feels the project is not meeting.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, as we've learned through our many hearings on cannabis and land use permits, this is the same type of circumstance where it's a land use permit. And so looking at the findings, we don't have that finding, which is the neighborhood compatibility, which we've heard from the appellant several times today, that we have in conditional use permits. So to echo what Mr. Seward says, when you look at the findings, in order to make the findings, in order to adjust the height, it would have to be related to either a specific policy in the comprehensive plan or in the land use and development code. It couldn't be based on neighborhood compatibility because, as Mr. Seward says, our discretion is limited on a land use permit.
That's very helpful. I think it's just a healthy discussion for us to have in public so that everybody understands as we move down the path on this project that there's only so much influence we can have on certain projects, of which it sounds like this is one. And I think that's all for now, Chair Cooney. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Freeney. Well said. We are locked within the limits of our ordinance, and that's true of many other projects that the Planning Commission sees, but certainly here, if this was subject to Architectural Board of Review approval, I'm sure you'd see some changes. But this is not the case. It's within the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors to add that requirement beyond where it is now. So perhaps that's something these neighbors would like to pursue. Okay, Commissioner Park, 3rd District item. Do you have questions or are you ready to move to deliberation?
I am. I want to address the point that you and Commissioner Freeney have just addressed. I think that you folks have overreacted to staff's advice, which was extremely narrow in scope. Generally speaking, I favor approval of this project because it's the kind of thing we see up here. I can see why they'd want it. It's allowed in zoning. It is what it is. The location of it, 40 feet closer to the house, makes a big difference. I get all that. concerns I have are the same that Commissioner Bridley expressed about landscaping, that any problem with this could be mitigated tremendously with proper landscaping, which wouldn't cost that much. And a concern over the height, possibly the width. Now, let me direct everybody's attention to page 8 of the staff report. And on page 8, you'll see part of the chart on policies, applicable policies, and is this consistent with the policy? Because we have to find, when we approve a project, that it's consistent with our general plan and any applicable community plans. That's our job. So if you look at visual resource policies, you'll see on the left-hand side on page 8, visual resource policy 3, which states, and I'm reading the second half of the first sentence, new structures, this is new structure, shall be in conformance with the scale and character of the existing community. You have to find that to approve this project. So yes, Secretary Wilson and Mr. Seward's are right that there's no compatibility finding, but conformance is kind of close. And it's saying conformance with the scale and character of the existing community. And when I look to see, is this in conformance with the scale and character of the existing community? It's larger than anything else there. It's taller than anything else there. And so that's a legitimate question. So we do have discretion to address this. We can vote to disapprove the project and say, sorry, it's not in conformance with the scale and character of the existing community. Now, one problem we have here is that we have an applicant and appellant who are very nice people that do not appear to be terribly sophisticated in the field of land use planning. And that's why we haven't had requests for site visits. Were I on site, I would go there and look to see the Bellers building at the back of their property. Does that screen them from what this would be? I would look from the Dove Meadow area to see what I'd see from here. I would go look at this thing and see whether it's going to make a difference to reduce it in any height. Because I think as a practical difference, you could reduce it 4 feet, just like my structures, and it worked perfectly well. But I'm not sure that's even necessary. So what am I getting at? We want to do the right job on this because that's our job. I want to do the right job for another reason, because I walk around in these neighborhoods with my dog or bicycling, and I hear from people all the time, did we make a right decision or a wrong decision? And I see them at the grocery store. We owe it to them to make a right decision. The Sederises are going to invest a lot of money, and the Bellers have already invested a lot of money. It may seem like a small project, but it's big to the people involved. I'd like to request that my fellow commissioners indulge me with a motion I'm going to make for a continuance so I can go make a proper site visit and invite any other commissioners who want to do that. So I can address those practical issues of what would one recommend for any landscaping that would mitigate any problems here, and what would one recommend for building height reduction and possibly width, but I'm not so sure about that, in order to make the finding that it's in conformance with the scale and character of the existing community. So therefore, I will make a motion to continue this matter and able to afford a site visit to such time as Secretary Wilson informs me would fit into our calendar as set forth in the projection report. Otherwise, I won't be able to vote on the project today.
Commissioner Farini?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for continuance. Discussion on the motion. Any of the other commissioners? I'd just add, I think one benefit of a continuance here would be to allow county council to look a little deeper into what appear to be conflicting ideas of what our discretion is in the case of a land use permit. And this case presents it. This isn't the center of Montecito, but the people who live there might well live in Montecito and maybe have. And I think if it's a land use permit and this is going to be happening throughout the county, we're better off to take the time now to get it right. So I would support the continuance and encourage County Council to render an opinion when we reconvene in this case as to the level of our discretion on these matters, which are visual and would normally be subject to a review by the Central Board of Architectural Review. Commissioner Bradley, any comment on the motion?
Yeah, I'm really divided about this because I think that staff did a very good analysis. I think that the code allows a lot of people, all owners on properties of all zoning designations and in all communities, to do probably more than what's built in the urban environment or semi-rural environment today. So part of me really wants to support the case as it stands, encourage the owner to work with the neighbors in terms of developing some landscaping, but veer away from trying to condition land use permits. So, however, having heard both you and Commissioner Farini and Commissioner Park, of course, I'll go along with the continuance motion, and particularly you, Chair Cooney, influenced me in going along with it because we'll see more of these, as ADUs come along and as properties get more intensely developed with all kinds of things that are not just the 1970s tract house look. So I'm inclined to support the motion, but thank you, because I was about to vote against it and now I changed my mind. So I'm with you on the continuance.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinez, any comment on the motion?
Yes, I mean, I think I'm fine with what Commissioner Park is requesting there. I think that might even allow the opportunity, from what we've heard, is the applicant has even offered for the appellant to review the plans, which I don't think has occurred, something of an exchange there, which might provide an opportunity. And I welcome the opportunity to see about the change. And what Commissioner Bradley has indicated, that there are changes in the tract homes. I mean, I'm sure we've seen it. I was just in Newport Beach and I saw the old ranch homes that were on Newport Beach height, and then compared to the huge homes that have been replacing those homes. And so this is nothing new, but obviously it's new to the Solvang area, and I welcome the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Martinez. Coming last, as you sometimes do, you pick up the beneficial remarks of your fellow commissioners very well. We appreciate it. Okay, so we have a motion, a second, and we need a date, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You read my mind. If we would like to schedule a site visit, and if the applicant wanted to make changes based on those site visits or a subsequent memo to that, we probably should push it out a month to give time to schedule a site visit and do that. So I'm looking at our calendar, so that would potentially put us at September 7th or August 31st. But I'm thinking September 7th.
I don't have a problem with the time, but that meeting already is scheduled to hear a hotly contested issue in my district in the Santa Claus Lane area. And if we're meeting in person, it would be difficult for the parties. Well, not so much in Solvang. It's not a huge drive down to Santa Barbara, probably about close to what it is to get to Santa Maria. So maybe that doesn't matter.
Commissioner or Chair Cooney, I would echo those comments in that would be that's going to be a very lengthy hearing potentially. So we might want to look at September 14th. I'm not trying to push it out longer, but it gives time for the applicant and site visits to be done. So September 14th or the 28th is what I'm hearing from staff. The September 14th has the outdoor cannabis cultivation, which is a conditional use permit, And the 28th is an appeal of a cannabis operation as well. So if the motion maker would like to look at September 14th or September 28th.
Commissioner Wilson, if I could just add one thing, we're adding a second cannabis project on the 14th. That should go on the report today. So that would put 2 items on the 14th. So I would suggest the 28th if we could.
Really? Yeah.
So
I don't think this will take that long once it comes back. But Commissioner Park, it's your district. You decide.
and may I speak, Chair Cooney?
Please do.
Yeah. I think we can develop the information relatively quickly. I don't know if we need 2 months. I always want to defer to staff on how to organize these meetings and what will work. Because if anything, it seems like we always underestimate how long things will take. On the other hand, I just, I know even from the Buell Flat one, there's so much I forget when there's a 2-month stretch between hearings on a matter. So I wonder, you've addressed the 7th and the 14th of September and now the 28th. On the 31st of August, do we have time for this or not? Or do we have time to prepare for it? And do we have time to hear it? We should at least ask that question.
Hi, Commissioners. We do have one item right now. I think it depends on if there are changes proposed to a project, we are dependent on the applicant to get those site plan sets to us, and then for us to have to put it in a memo and get it uploaded. So it's just dependent on what happens after the site visit. I mean, we could try the 31st, and if it's not ready, we can continue it at that point. That could work.
You'd have to have all the input from whatever happened really by mid-month, wouldn't you, to do your normal document?
Correct.
Process?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We'd be pushing it then. I think to be fair to staff and to explore this to the degree that's necessary to just really get it a good, fair solution for everybody, we're better off going to the 28th of September. So that's what I'd like my motion to be, to continue it to the 28th of September. Is that okay with the second?
That is Commissioner Franny.
The second is not like that, but it's all we got. We had a thorough discussion on it, and I support the motion.
Okay.
Well, are we still discussing the motion, Chair?
We are discussing the motion. We're going to do it for one more second. So go ahead.
Okay. This is really quick. I mean, it could go on the projection report for August 31st, and then it's entirely up to staff. If they don't have the deliverables, then they can push it to September 28th, right? I mean, we could actually set the bar aggressively, and then if they don't make it, then they have the discretion to move it to the September 28th hearing, right? Do we actually have to take, in other words, maybe it's a county council question, do we actually have to take a motion to continue it? Does it have to be noticed for the September 28th if by, August 15th, none of the deliverables are in to staff?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bradley, if I could interject, and
Please.
council can correct me. What we're doing is we're setting a date specific in this motion. Then if we do a date specific, then we don't notice it. So if you do a date specific for August 31st, then it's going to be on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
It takes it out of staff's hands once you do a date specific. And so then you would have to hear it on the 31st and have another motion to continue it if it wasn't ready. And so in order to be ready, we need at least at the minimum 3 weeks to get things even on the agenda uploaded. So we're really needing everything done by the 1st of August in order to make an August 31st hearing.
Oh, okay. That really helps. Hopefully it helps Commissioner Martinez, because I should have known that, but I thank you for clarifying that. So therefore, I'm completely in support of Commissioner Park's motion.
Good. Any further discussion? Let's call the roll before we get any more.
Commissioner Bradley,
Commissioner what? Oh, Commissioner Bridley. That's how we pronounce it. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes.
You're so much nicer than I am about that.
Commissioner
Thanks,
Park.
John.
And I'm going to use this opportunity to beg Mr. Sedaris and Ms. Beller to contact me absolutely as soon as possible to arrange at least my site visit, get going on this thing. And my cell phone number, my personal cell phone number is right there on the county website for everyone to see, as well as my personal email address that I at least read, probably don't respond to, but at least read that stuff. So aye.
Commissioner Farini.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
And Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, well, with some late tailoring, we have finished the agenda for today. Our next meeting is next week, the 3rd, also by Zoom. So we'll see everybody in a week. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cooney.